All right, let's start. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Vishal, and I am the co-president of IntEnt, or graduate entrepreneurship organization. And today we have Adam Williams from BC Library to help us walk us through the process of market research. We'll basically start today's workshop by introducing IntEnt and IntEnt's overview. Then Adam will talk about the resources that we have for market research. Then we'll briefly talk about market research. We'll discuss different tools and ways to go about conducting market research on companies and industries. Then we'll conduct a small group exercise to make sure that what we have learned in the workshop, we're able to apply it as well. And then we'll wrap up with some networking activities. As IntEnt, our purpose and mission is to we are a Boston College graduate student organization, and we provide mentorship, experiential learning, and collaborative resources to BC graduate entrepreneurs. Our mission is to develop, train, support, and inspire a community of entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial leaders grounded by Jesuit principles. And we dedicate ourselves to act ethically and altruistically in this world. IntEnt organization has several programming to basically cater to several different needs of students. We have our workshop that is where we offer building business basic skills that is offered by business matter experts and our faculty advisors. We have apprenticeship program where we connect aspiring entrepreneurially minded students to local startup firms, and so that students can get hands-on experiential experience, work experience, working with the organizations. Then we have incubator program that we use to basically help students who have a business idea, qualify it into a business plan with the help of subject matter experts, faculty advisors, and student mentors. And then we have our accelerator program where we help students who have a well-defined and well-developed business idea or a business plan and help them develop that to a investor pitch deck where they can take their business plan to seek the necessary funding that they need in order to expand. My name is Vishal. My background is in molecular biology. I have, before BC, I'm a second year MBA student at Boston College at the moment. Before BC, I was working as a junior scientist at the Wyss Institute, which is a part of Harvard University. And I came to BC because I was inspired by the commercialization of science and wanted to learn how the business development of science happens. And currently I'm working as a business development intern back at the Wyss Institute to basically help commercialize a project that I helped start as a scientist. One of the challenges that I faced as a business development expert or intern was how to even conduct a market research, which is one of the first steps in developing a business idea. And I faced several challenges, and that's where this idea of conducting this workshop occurred. How do you teach people how to conduct business market research so that they can go through the several layers of business in order to understand this business in a holistic manner? So how do you go about looking at an industry, narrowing it down to the market within the regions, and then how do you look at several competitors to really understand where your business idea or your company stands? To give you an example, as I mentioned, I'm helping spin out a startup from Harvard University, and it's a rare disease focused pharmaceutical drug discovery company. And in order to do my market research work, I basically started with looking at the whole pharmaceutical industry, what the revenues are, what the market caps are. And within that, I looked at the neurology market, looked at the rare disease section within the neurology market, and then looked at the competitors such as Novartis, Biogen. And how did I go about doing that is something that Adam will share. Adam was incredibly instrumental, incredibly helpful through my summer program for my internship to seek some of these important information to conduct my job. And I am sure Adam will do the same with you guys.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks for having me for a brief moment of your time. As mentioned, I'm one of the librarians here at Boston College. There's a little bit of information about myself up on the slide right now. Been a librarian for quite a while, and I've been at BC for about 5 years, and I've mostly focused in on applied sciences, like business and other areas as well. I'm currently the liaison to the business school. So you can think of me as someone to help you track down secondary research. And as Vishal mentioned, any sort of research that you're looking for company research or things of the nature of this particular presentation. So feel free to get in touch with me in any of those ways that are listed there. I believe this presentation will be shared out at the end of this presentation, so you'll have access to all of this after the fact. So today I'm going to switch over and share my screen, so there'll be a little bit of a switch here.
While we do that, Adam, I also wanted to say to our participating students that you can also find Adam's information on Canvas under library section. At least in all the classes that I have taken, I was able to find Adam's information through Canvas under library section if you're looking for something, an immediate way to connect with Adam as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that aspect. My picture and contact information didn't get plastered everywhere. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to track down. So you don't have to rely on the presentation.
Right.
As Vishal mentioned, we are going to be looking at a path that you might take to doing research, market research, and the broad way in which we're going to approach it for this particular presentation is starting at the industrial level, then looking at the company level, and then looking at sort of the demographic and consumer level. So that's not necessarily the only way to do research. Research is actually much more often a messy process. So this is just a clean way of kind of presenting things that kind of organizes it in a way. And if you have the opportunity to sort of browse to funnel essentially your research from the industrial point down to a more narrow focused, that would be ideal. But you know, that's an ideal circumstance. So all the resources that I'm going to be showing you today are coming out of the entrepreneurship guide. And I'll just throw the link in the chat here because I do think it is worth putting in it's worth taking a look at while we're here. So you should all get that link. So a lot of the resources that are there we won't cover. This is by no means a comprehensive presentation on the research that's available to you or the sources of information. So feel free to browse through. That particular guide is segmented into different resources, and hopefully it'll guide you to the right place. A lot of these will overlap as well, so bear that in mind. The other thing I want to mention is that while you're at BC, you've got access to all the resources that are in the entrepreneurship guide. But once you leave the doors of BC, your access becomes a little bit much more restricted, just because you'll be in a different status and just won't have the off-campus access that you will have now. But that doesn't mean that you don't have access to business resources. And I would encourage you to really look at the information landscape wherever you happen to end up. So for instance, if you stay in Boston, the Boston Public Library has its own business library and has a wealth of resources. Maybe not as robust as BC's, but still very comparable to what we have here. And that extends into other institutions that might have libraries that are open to you, including Boston College. It's just that you would have to come here to access these resources. But as long as you're a BC student or actively a staff member or faculty or some active community member, you will have access to the resources that we cover. So with that, I'm going to dive in. And as I mentioned, the This is by no means comprehensive. It's just to help you get eyes on the resources that are available to you, and it's not covering every possible angle. That's why I'm here. I'm here to sort of help you navigate and burrow down into your research more thoroughly than maybe what we can cover here. So starting at that industrial level, a really good place to get started is IBIS World. So this is a company that specializes in analyzing huge industries and gathers up their own sort of proprietary information about the various industries and puts it all together in a very comprehensive report. If you go to IBIS, and I should have mentioned, I apologize for switching back and forth. Just to be able to show you these databases, I've got to leave the presentation and then go back. So just bear with that. But when you jump into IBIS World, they try to make it as easy as possible to search for things. And just by way of example, inspired by Vishal's interests, we're going to look at pharmaceuticals. And in fact, if you're paying close attention to the screen, you probably noticed that there's already a pharmaceutical report up there as recently viewed. I was already sort of playing around with this earlier. So these are things to give a try at, but really it is as simple as typing in pharmaceutical in this case, because that's maybe what we're interested in. You get to select from a variety of reports that are available there. In this case, they have brand name from pharmaceutical manufacturing. Let's say that's our interest, or generic manufacturing. I'm just going to use the brand name just as an example, just so you can kind of see what's in here. And again, I'm not going to cover this in like any really great depth, but it is worth sort of taking a look at what's available here. As long as the internets decide to work. Another thing to keep in mind is that industry level research, it is about, one thing you may have noticed is that the NAI CS code that came up with it too, that can be really important information for tracking down industry level stuff as well, and not just using keywords like pharmaceutical like we did there, but the NAICS code is actually really valuable. Just that's like a pro tip. If you know what NAICS code you need, then definitely use that. So rather than sort of browse through the report in the middle here, I would like to draw your attention to what's going on over here on the left. This is your table of contents essentially. And as you can see, it's pretty extensive what they cover. You get your industry outlook. Let's actually just go to that section. And it just walks you through the current outlook. And these reports are pretty up to date frequently. Like IBIS World's job is to produce these reports. As you can see, Dan Spitzer, wrote this, finished this up in August 2020. So you know you've got really current information. So browsing through this can give you a lot of give you basically the lay of the land for this particular area. And some other things that you might pay attention to is thinking ahead about the next steps in your research. It'll lay out sort of the major players under the major companies here. And you'll see some pretty familiar names in here in terms of who's present. Pfizer comes up obviously, as well as other say pharmaceutical manufacturing companies in the U.S. in particular. So the other, I'm gonna switch back to the presentation. The other resource that you could take a look at is Business Source Complete. This is a little bit more of a broader database, and using Business Source Complete, you want to keep a couple things in mind. It's not just searching industry reports, but that's I think it's part of its strength. It does include other things in here like journal articles or you know, trade magazines or reports that are put out for other purposes. Those can all be helpful to uncovering details about your industry and where things, basically the lay of the land in other senses. So the way I like to use Business Source Complete just to get started in looking at industry information is, again, using our handy term that we're using. I can't spell apparently. Thank goodness for autocorrect. So pharmaceutical, just as a search term, but then if we really want to focus in on marketing materials or industry profiles, using the limit your results is a way that you can focus in on a type of publication. So in this case, we could use industry profile and market research reports. So this is only going to search those kinds of things that are represented in this database. You may want to say more broadly, you know, pharmaceutical manufacturing. That could be another way you search things, just to see what else might be there, in addition to all the reports. So it logged me out. Trust me when I say that it will get you to the particular resources for different reports. I won't belabor this point, but just keep in mind that you want to use the extra functions of the database to try and get to more focused results for whatever research that you're doing. And I do like to throw out, so back to the presentation just for a little bit, will like to throw out that the Census Bureau also has a business and economy gateway. There's a lot of free information available there that's put together by the government. Again, thinking about beyond the doors of BC and what you might need to look at when you don't have access to, say, IBIS or Business Source Complete. So the next step would be taking a look at the company level research. This is to figure out where a company that you might have an interest in looking at sits in terms of its competitors. Maybe you want to look at some of the executive structure of the company and other details. This is where Mergent Online is an invaluable resource. I think it's probably one of the better resources for looking at company data, especially for big companies, public companies, or large private companies. Those are the kinds of information that you're going to find in Mergent Online. Going into Mergent, hopefully you all can see that. It works similarly as we did with IBIS and Business Source Complete. We just search, we're just using terminology to get to information. And I think in this case, we'll use Pfizer as an example. If you're using a company that has kind of multiple iterations, essentially, pick the one that makes the most sense. So for instance, we don't want to pick the Pfizer PT, Pfizer Indonesia inactive, right? We want to pick the index term for the Pfizer Inc. in this particular case. So it's just something to keep in mind. But once you do find the company, or if you do see the company pop up, this is where you start to access way more information than I think anyone could ever absorb in any one sitting. So each of these, so this is sort of like just the broad synopsis page that we landed on. But as you can see, just within company details, you've got tabs within tabs, and it's a rather extensive rabbit hole. But in terms of looking at, say, where a company is situated in, say, the larger competitive landscape, the competitors tab, just to hit on this point, competitors tab is a good place to take a look at that kind of information. So for instance, here, just by revenue, Pfizer Inc. comes in 4th place as compared to the other companies that are out there that are involved with pharmaceutical preparations and manufacturing. And as you noticed, or if you haven't noticed, the NAICS code keep popping up everywhere. So if you wanted to say search in Mergent for using the NAICS code, that would be a pretty handy way to browse for other companies as well. There is some industrial information here to be had. So that's kind of Mergent, just to kind of Mergent in a nutshell, just to get at company information. The next resource is Thompson 1. So Thompson 1 is a little bit of a it's probably one of the more powerful tools out there. Eventually, it's going to be called Refinitiv, as indicated in the little graphic there to the right. But Thompson 1 is a industry standard in terms of tracking down information on like companies. It also includes information on mergers and acquisitions that you won't find in Mergent Online. So there's going to be a lot of overlap with the information between these two, but Thompson 1 does have unique information in here. The one key thing that you need to keep in mind, at least until it makes the switch over to Refinitiv, you do need to use Internet Explorer, oddly, to access this database. So if you want to follow along, fire up your Internet Explorer and see if, or if you even have it. If not, we can always work around that at the library with you. So Thompson 1 works like we've been doing in every other instance. We're looking at Thompson 1 in particular for company information. So in that case, you want to make sure that the company views tab is checked off, or at least selected. It'll be highlighted here. And then that will allow you to search for Pfizer, essentially. And we're interested in the US here. Again, just pay attention to what you're looking at before you click on anything. And not unlike we were seeing in the Mergent Online, you get sort of a profile page. They tend to break things up into different, Internet Explorer. They tend to break things up into, rather than like tabs, they have drop-down menus under company views, and then this is basically the kind of information that you have access to. They're encapsulated in these areas or these titled areas like market data, related links, that kind of thing. So even though it's a little bit clunky, the kind of information that's here is pretty phenomenal in my opinion. As I mentioned, you can get a lot of really good information about mergers and acquisitions. And because Pfizer is such a huge company, under the latest 5 deals section, it gives you the latest mergers and acquisitions that they've, or the most recent procurements that they've made of other companies. That little symbol there to the right is the tear sheet, gives you the breakdown of what they paid for the company, kind of the deal that went with it, and those kinds of things. So Thompson 1, despite its anachronistic use of Internet Explorer, is an incredible resource, and it's really worth going through.
Adam, if I may jump in real quick,
Yeah.
I totally attest to the power of Thompson 1. I used it extensively for my market research for my internship. You're right, it does require an Internet Explorer. And since I'm a Mac user, it was a huge difficulty because you can't really have an active, download an active. I found it very difficult to download Internet Explorer on my Mac computer. So I found an Internet Explorer extension on my Google Chrome that I was able to use to access Thomson 1. So there are definitely ways around it. You don't necessarily have to be on campus to do that. You can certainly do it on your computer as well. If you have Windows, well and good. If not, you can also find an extension to that.
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, we're already in talks with the Thomson 1 reps to sort of transition into Refinitiv over the next year. So this will all go away within the next year, but it will operate in much the same way. We're not, so you only have to suffer through it for maybe half a year or so before we make that transition. So until then, we're kind of stuck with this. So one resource I did want to point out very briefly is the Reference USA. This is good if you're not interested in, say, really large companies, or you're focused in a more a smaller region. So say you're interested in businesses in Boston. Reference USA is really good for small to medium private businesses, as well as will represent public businesses as well. You can search it by industry code, and it's useful for if you're not if your research is taking you in a direction that's more focused on a local level. So I want to put that in there just because Thomson 1 and Mergent Online, where they shine, is at the really big player level. They do have some sort of medium-sized companies in there, but their information starts to taper off when you start getting into smaller like mom and pop restaurants or what have you. So it's worth pointing out. So after you've kind of discovered the companies that you're interested in, get to know the demographic that you're trying to incorporate into your research. And these resources here, I think, are really good ways of getting a sense of things. And they're Statista and Mintel, they're kind of two different approaches to figuring out who your people are. So Statista is more about just the numbers. So if we're interested in a likely user of pharmaceutical products, this is where you have to sort of think about the demographic that you're interested in. So older adults would probably be one way that you might look at it. You could also say boomer, you could say elderly. There's a lot of different ways you can sort of maybe get at that same demographic. I'm going to use older adults, and this is, as you'll see pretty quickly, it really just gives you a wealth of different information if you want to specify. So for instance, like kidney disease is the second result there with older adults. Maybe that's an interest that you have in terms of treating, using pharmaceuticals to treat a particular ailment. And this will give you essentially just the numbers, right? A good way to sort of get a broader picture. This is national data. You may be able to find state data, all that kind of, you just have to kind of play around with your terminology and sort of browse through the results to see what you might be able to pull up. Again, pure numbers, pure statistics. On the flip side, Mintel is actually not unlike IBIS does industry analysis. Mintel does demographic analysis, and I find their information pretty valuable as well. You have to agree to the terms before you access them. And in this case, you want to think about market segments that you want to explore. So as I mentioned, you might have to play around with your terminology a little bit. In this case, maybe we want to do baby boomers in this particular case, because that's a lot like older adults. And in fact, if you look over at the suggested titles, they've got a report on baby boomers and health. So that would be pretty relevant to what the pharmaceutical industry sort of generally. And they have analysts that go through and figure out what is this particular segment buying? What is this particular segment, what are they like culturally? Those kinds of things. So, and you'll get a ton of information here, market, consumer, brands, and companies that they might be buying, and other data that's listed here as well. So it's something worth taking a look at. Again, May 2020, really recent reports, really recent information that you'll find here about your particular group of people that you want to incorporate into your research. So I realize that is a sort of a blazing fast overview. Oh, and I forgot to mention the Bureau of Labor Statistics and puts together a couple of different surveys. Consumer Expenditure Survey, American Time Use Survey, both of those break things down by demographic. Learn about, those are free resources that can be really handy as well. And it does not require you to be on BC campus. So as I was starting to say, that's a pretty breakneck speed through sort of doing this kinds of research. But again, the intention was just to have you get eyes on these resources and get you a link to the entrepreneurship guide, so you can start to explore these on your own, and then pull me in when you have specific questions. And that's what I'm here for. That's what I enjoy doing. So please do reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions about exploring these resources. So with that, I'll hand it back to Vishal, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Adam. So that constitutes our lecture part of the workshop. What I have right now